The Princess of Hyrule and her appointed knight, after spending the day praying at the Spring of Wisdom in hopes of finally awakening Zelda's divine power necessary to seal away Calamity Ganon, returned back to the 4 champions who anxiously waited at the east gate of the Lanayru Road. The Goron champion, Daruk, eager to know if her prayers had been answered, asked the princess how everything went up the mountain. However, despite her best efforts, Zelda had once again failed to awaken her divine power, somberly shaking her head in response to Daruk's question. The whole group were visibly disappointed to learn she had no lack in awakening her sealing powers. Even Revali, who hardly showed affection for anyone other than himself, shared his concern and support for the distraught princess. Urbosa reassured Zelda that she did all she possibly could, and that there still might be a way to awaken her power through some other means. They just needed to find whatever it was that would finally spark the power within her. Upon hearing this, Mipha had a sudden realization, as she turned to look at Link, suddenly standing behind the princess. Turning to Zelda, Mipha, despite being embarrassed to share this with the group, began to tell Zelda of what she usually thought of when using her healing power. But before she could finish her sentence and reveal that what she kept in her mind while she healed was the one she loved, Link, the ground around them began to shake violently, catching everyone by surprise. As they stumbled to remain on their feet, the Rito champion, Revali, took off to the sky above to inspect their surroundings, only to catch a glimpse of the horrors taking place at Hyrule Castle. Calamity Ganon, the threat they were preparing for this entire time, had finally returned.
He appeared from deep below Hyrule Castle in the form of a dense, violent storm, the specter of the Demon King swirling around the central hub of the kingdom, its malice spreading as it let out a deafening roar. As uncontrollable fear began to grow within Zelda as she looked at the looming dark clouds that slowly covered the twilight sky, Daruk was forced to take control of the situation and formed a desperate plan to take down Ganon. He ordered the champions to head to their respective divine beasts, while instructing Link to head to Hyrule Castle. They would aid the hero while he faced off against Ganon within the castle, but it was up to him to deal the ending blow to the Demon King. Urbosa told Zelda that they needed to get her somewhere safe. However, the princess couldn't simply run and hide while her people suffered. And although she was not a warrior like the rest of them, she asked if there was anything she could do to help. From this point, Link and Zelda presumably headed toward Hyrule Castle on foot, ready to face Calamity Ganon in any way they could, as the champions hurried to their divine beasts within their respective regions. However, Ganon did not intend to fall to the same antics of 10,000 years ago, and so he concocted a plan of his own, one that the inhabitants of the entire kingdom would not see coming. From within Hyrule Castle, Ganon unleashed torrents of malice into the world, permeating the many unearthed guardians from across the kingdom, turning the once loyal Sheikah constructs against the very people they were meant to protect. Machines of death and destruction under the complete control of the Calamity. Ganon then cast out 4 shards of himself to each of the 4 divine beasts, phantom versions of Ganon made from a combination of malice and ancient weaponry that would assume control of the divine beasts and their elemental powers, those being water, fire, wind, and lightning. When the champions arrived at their respective divine beasts, they were ambushed by the 4 elemental spawns of the Calamity. Despite picking up a fight against the 4 blights, the champions lost their lives, their spirits bound to be trapped within the divine beasts for the next 100 years. Mipha's power of regeneration was insufficient to heal her devastating wounds caused by Water Blight Ganon. Daruk's shield of protection shattered against the ferocious might of Fire Blight Ganon. Revali's mastery over flight could not evade the deadly precision of the beams of Wind Blight Ganon. And Urbosa's incredible sword skills were no match for the unparalleled speed of Thunderblight Ganon. As no one but a champion could step within a divine beast, the champions were presumed dead by their respective tribes, the champions themselves holding on to the hope that Link, the remaining champion, would one day come to free their spirits and reclaim the divine beasts from Ganon.
legions of guardians poured forth from 5 giant columns that emerged around Hyrule Castle, following the return of Ganon. 5 enormous Sheikah-made monoliths housing the entirety of the Guardian arsenal, said to only rise from the ground upon the revival of the Calamity. The unstoppable mechanical army now being unleashed by Calamity Ganon to completely obliterate the kingdom and everyone in it. The castle was devastated by the destructive lasers of the Guardians. The guards, cooks, maidens, all fell to the automata, including Hyrule's king, Rhombos Foramus Hyrule, Zelda's father, caught by surprise by the Calamity and shot dead by the devastating beams of the overwhelming Guardians.
The corrupted Sheikah constructs continued forth, ravaging the capital town of Hyrule and the surrounding villages and garrisons, blasting anything in sight until the settlements became nothing more than rubble and dust, its people decimated by the unending stream of attacks. Those who managed to escape from the villages made a hasty evacuation towards the Hylian village past Fort Hateno in the eastern region of Necluda, guided by the surviving soldiers stationed at the Hyrule and Colomo garrisons. By the time Link and Zelda reached the Hyrulean capital, it was already in ruins and overrun by Guardians, those who once lived within its walls now dead or having fled from the onslaught. Seeing the destruction caused by Calamity Ganon, and now spotted by the countless Guardians who quickly began their pursuit, Link took hold of the princess's hand as he led her to safety under the heavy downpour of rain, their new destination being the safe haven of Kakariko Village. Using the trees of the many forests as cover, the muddied and worn down Link and Zelda desperately made their escape along the river, guiding the remaining survivors that they came across to Necluda as they went. As the exhausted duo were halfway toward reaching the dueling peaks, the devastated princess slipped from his grasp, falling to her knees in total defeat. Link turned around and kneeled before her, as Zelda gave in to despair, blaming herself for the deaths of everyone in Hyrule, including the 4 champions and her own father, all because she could not harness her sealing power. Surrendering to her emotions and unable to hold back any longer, Zelda broke down before Link, crying uncontrollably on his lap as her protector and friend consoled her. Ganon had taken everything from her.
But it wasn't just the Hylians who suffered this devastation. In Lanayru, a stray Guardian crossed Upland Sorana into Sora's domain. The Guardians seemed unstoppable, and even the spears of the best soldiers didn't even leave a scratch on his metal hull. It was then that King Dorephan, without a thought for his own safety, came out to face the Guardian himself. As the Great King and the Possessed Machine battled, Dorephan received a mighty scar on his forehead that would serve as a reminder of the battle, and with supernatural strength, he lifted the Guardian and hurled it into a ravine, the Guardian being destroyed with the impact. The Sora celebrated the King's courage, and from then on, their trust and respect for him grew beyond compare. Pursued by the fast-approaching Guardians, Link and Zelda reached Blatchery Plain, where they joined with the other survivors, who mustered their strength to prevent the Guardians from passing through Fort Hateno and into the vulnerable village. Although the narrow pathway between the dueling peaks limited the number of Guardians that could pass through at once, the forces of the fort had limited firepower. It was only a matter of time before the Guardians broke through their defenses and made their way towards Hateno village. Link faced against many Guardians as he protected both the fort and Princess Zelda with his life, despite the princess's desperate pleas for him to save himself. However, the exhausted and gravely wounded Link, wielding a heavily damaged Master Sword, rusted by the decaying properties of malice, stood his ground, devoted to saving the princess's life, even if it meant losing his own. As more and more Guardians continued to pour in through the mountain's fissure. As Link rested his weight on the dulled blade, beginning to lose the strength to even keep standing, a lone Guardian spotted both Link and Zelda, climbing over the corpses of the other defeated Guardians, and pointing its laser at the chest of the hero, preparing to strike. Without a moment of hesitation or regard to her own life, Princess Zelda pushed Link to the side and instinctively raised her hand towards the mechanical horror, when all of a sudden, a miracle happened. In that precise moment, a bright flash of light began to emanate from her hand, engulfing the entire battlefield. Zelda's love for Link and her desire to save him had awakened her sealing power. The divine light created by the princess forced the malice of the approaching guardians to fade away, causing the tainted machines to collapse, now lifeless carcasses littered through the plain. Zelda looked at her hand in complete shock. The power she had sought to awaken her entire life had finally appeared in her time of need. It was then that the princess heard a loud thud behind her. Quickly turning to see that Link had collapsed onto the muddied grass of the plains. Hurrying to his aid, she frantically reassured the hero that he would be okay, as the defeated Link looked at Zelda one final time before losing consciousness, his strength quickly fading from his body as he succumbed to his wounds. As Zelda cried for Link, believing him to be gone, a mysterious voice from within the Master Sword began to call out to the princess, the voice of Fi, the spirit that slept within the blade since ancient times, who told the princess that Link could still be saved. It was then that two Sheikah warriors sent by the warrior Impa from Kakariko, who had ordered a large-scale search for Princess Zelda, hurried to her aid. The princess, believing Fi's words, entrusted the care of Link to the Sheikah and tasked them to take him to the Shrine of Resurrection, a medical facility found within a great plateau, capable of healing the gravest of wounds. As Zelda made her way to Kakariko village to meet with Impa, the two Sheikah warriors carried Link to the Great Plateau, where they met with the scientists Pura and Robbie, who managed to escape from the laboratory, salvaging the guidance stones and several ancient parts before heading towards Kakariko village. Together, with the use of the Sheikah Slate, they activated the Chamber of Restoration and placed Link into stasis within a healing tank, where he would slowly recover from his wounds for a long century. They then left the Sheikah Slate within a terminal next to the fallen hero, so it would aid him when he came out of stasis, and headed out of the sanctuary, sealing Link within the structure until the time came where he awakened from his long slumber.
Unable to face the overwhelming waves of guardians spawned by the columns, the soldiers stationed within Hyrule Castle Town were forced to make a hasty retreat to the northern citadel of Akkala, a massive and heavily armored stronghold said to be impenetrable. The fortress was built atop the highest peak of a steep mountain that stood between the two roads that led to Deep Akkala from central Hyrule, one leading to the north following the base of Death Mountain, while the other branched out to the east, passing through the bridges suspended over the Akkala Lake and continuing upwards. The primary function of Akkala Citadel was to repel invaders that came from the sea and prevent them from marching into central Hyrule. Its 3 batteries were strategically lined up to obliterate those who came from the eastern road, Battery 3 being the main force of attack, while the first 2 finished off the survivors. The exact number of soldiers that defended the citadel is unclear, but it's safe to assume that the number was quite large considering the size of the fortress. Due to Akkala Citadel's positioning in the mountain's top, transportation of provisions was considerably hard, especially in times of war, making it impossible to reinforce the boundaries. With the amount of fortification in the stronghold, Akkala Citadel was well suited to defend against traditional invaders. However, the threat that was heading their way was nothing they had ever faced before, and beyond what the Citadel was built to defend against. The Guardians came from the southern entrance to Akkala in great numbers, as Akkala's defenses fired torrents of cannon fire towards the mechanical army, which proved to be practically ineffective, leaving not a single dent on the shells of the automated arachnids. The Guardians blasted their way through the Citadel's walls, massacring everyone in sight, and the impenetrable fortress, which has stood strong for many years, finally fell to the Calamity, and with it, so too, did the Kingdom of Hyrule.
Zelda reunited with Impa upon reaching Kakariko village, who was overjoyed to see she was still alive. Telling her of what had happened to Link and the awakening of her sealing powers, Zelda asked Impa to relay a message to Link when he awakened from his slumber, to free the 4 divine beasts. Zelda then embarked on a journey towards Korok Forest to return the damaged Master Sword back into its pedestal, under the watchful eye of the Great Deku Tree, so that it, too, could recover like its master. Before placing the blade within its pedestal, Zelda reassured the sentient blade that Link would once again return to reclaim it in the future, despite the sleep of restoration likely depriving the hero of his past memories. The Great Deku Tree then asked Zelda what her next course of action would be moving forward. Telling the Wise Tree that the Master Sword spoke to her and that her role remained unfinished, she decided to head to Hyrule Castle to face against Calamity Ganon alone. The Deku Tree praised the princess for her strength, and she asked him to relay a message to Link when he returned. The Deku Tree cutting her off and advising her that her message would sound much better coming from her instead, to which she agreed. Then, by herself, Zelda ventured within the heart of the castle, and with her fully awakened power, she faced and suppressed the might of Calamity Ganon, keeping the Demon King in check for a century, halting Ganon's assault on what remained of the ruined kingdom, and thus finally putting an end to the catastrophic events that came to be known as the Great Calamity. And that were the events of the Great Calamity. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Nintendo Black Crisis for collaborating with me on this video. A link to his channel will be in the description and pinned comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get notified of future uploads. Also, consider following me on Twitter and Instagram if you haven't already to stay in touch. This has been ZeldaLore, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.